Welcome, everyone. I'm Nadine, and I'm just standing in today for David and June. And I'd like to invite you to begin with to join me in grounding yourself in the deep knowledge that for generations the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation practiced song and dance on this country. They made paintings, they made sculptures, they shared stories and practiced healing. These traditions and rituals continue today, and it's a joy and honour to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. We're welcoming Lucienne Rickard here today to speak with us. Lucienne's earned, just a bit of background on Lucienne, has earned a Bachelor of Visual Arts from the Queensland College of Art in 2001. She relocated to Hobart to study at the University of Tasmania, where she earned a first-class honours in 2002, is that right? And then a PhD in fine art in 2006. Upon graduating, Rickard, Lucienne, I can call you, was awarded the Rosamond McCulloch Studio Residency at the Cite in Paris. She spent the last 10 years working primarily in drawing, with her work acquired by the National Gallery of Australia, the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and the Tasmanian Museum of Art. That's the TMAG. For the last decade, her work has focused on conservation. She performed Extinction Studies, her durational drawing work at TMAG in Tasmania for 4 years between 2019 and 2023. I'm sure we'll hear more about it in a moment. And most recently presented Rec, her 10-metre long drawing at Aarhus Museum in Denmark. Rickard's performance of Rec will open at the Fiona and Sidney Myer Gallery next Thursday, the 8th. So it's with great pleasure that I pass you over to Lucienne.
Thank you. Thanks very much to everyone for rocking up. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'd also like to just sort of repeat that acknowledgement of country and elders here on this land that I'm lucky enough to be visiting and working on for a little while. All right, let's get started here. I'm going to put my timer on to make sure that I don't ramble too much. So as was said, I'm basically a drawer these days. I started out as a sculptor, but I mainly just practice in drawing now. And I thought I'd start out with a really scary self-portrait to introduce myself to you guys. So it's the only self-portrait I would ever do. And it was my COVID project as well too, for our really teeny tiny lockdown that we had in Tassie. We got off really light, you guys didn't, I know, but this was done over a month-long period when Tassie sort of ground to a halt like everywhere else in 2019. And I think there's about 60 drawings of myself on there that I've drawn and erased and drawn over and over again on the same piece of paper. I tend to like to work with materials and to push them as far as I can with my process. So if I'm using paper, I'll use it until there's bits falling off and peeling and holes starting to appear. Not the best advice if you want to grow up to be a commercial artist, to compromise your materials straight away and make them non-archival. But it's really interesting though when you start to figure out exactly what paper will do. We'll go to the next. And basically what I'm doing with this slideshow is I'm just taking you on a really speedy tour of my work over the last 20 years, I think this is. What's this, 2003? And that's just to kind of introduce you to the main kind of themes that underpin my work and you know, always have and still do. So this is part of my PhD submission. These are blocks of plaster that I cast in the studio. So they're about 60 by 60 by about 10 centimetres deep, solid plaster. And then you can see there's grooves worn into the plaster. So how that occurred was this is the kind of crazy stuff that you only get away with when you're doing a PhD in fine art, or you're a really big artist that's actually made it and you can, do whatever you want. But I made these grooves with my body. So I made a little, like a coverall sort of suit that you buy at Bunnings. I glued bits of industrial sandpaper to my coveralls. And then I performed movements into the plaster for, I think maybe about 3-4 months each on these pieces. So the one on the right, yes, the one on your right, that one's called Movement 1, and I did that with my shoulders. So the blocks are on the ground and I sort of performed this kind of bowing movement into the blocks in a little dust tent in my studio for about 3 months until I wore a groove into it. And the one on the left there in the wooden kind of frame, that was done with my back, and I guess not my bum, maybe a little bit of my bum, and some hands and stuff in there too. So it was about thinking about time and about absence and presence. And I guess that's what I'm always thinking about with my work. I'm really, really interested in the idea of absence and presence being these kind of partners to each other. One doesn't exist without the other. So that was kind of about, producing a sense of the absence of the human body. What have we got? Oh, no. Oh, bugger. I have said I'm a Luddite that can't use technology, and I'm really proving that now. Hang on. Have I got it? Nah.
Yeah, try the
Arrow.
Okay.
Here we go. Thank you.
Okay.
This is a work on paper about, I think it's about 1 metre and a bit by 80 centimetres, and it's a piece of paper that once again I've completely ensured that I can never sell to anyone because it will fall apart at any moment in time. But what I've done there, if I go to the next one, right.
Hit the left side.
Oh, there we go. Okay. It's a process that I've been using here where I'm dipping a hammer into printmaking ink and then hammering the paper. And that was done as a performance as well too in Hobart. So it was a performance where people were provided with ear protection to come in and view because it was really loud. And I would hammer the paper for 2 hours a night for, I think it was about 3 weeks that I did that one for. And some very funny people actually did buy a few of those ones. So hopefully they're still holding together. But I'm interested in that moment where the present becomes the past, or, a moment that has passed. So in that action, when I'm hammering the paper, that moment is about being present, because you can't help but be present when you're hammering something and you hear that noise and you feel the impact. But as soon as the mark's made, it becomes a dead thing. So that was what I was thinking about there. And it was just really fun to hammer paper too. I highly recommend. Okay, so that was the kind of the tour of my past work. This is probably, I'll talk about Extinction Studies for a little while here, because it's one of the major works that I've done in the last few years. And it's probably the only work that I've done in the last few years, because it did take 4 years and 3 months. But I'll take you through it. So that's me. Oh, and just a disclaimer as well too, the whole time that I was making Extinction Studies, this work, I was growing out a shaved head. So you're going to see me go through some really awkward phases in these photos. If you've got curly hair, like, maybe don't shave your head. I can give you that advice as well too. I don't know why I decided to work in public when I was growing out a shaved head. There were so many bad photos of me on Instagram that I was being tagged into. So sacrificing for your art, definitely. So as you can see there's an entranceway on the left of my workspace there. So that's the main entrance to the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery. And I'm working there in a space called the Link Foyer. So everyone that came to the museum in the 4 years that I was working there had to walk past my workspace. You can probably see that there's information there. So I was drawing a swift parrot. With Extinction Studies, I would work 5 days a week at the museum. So I treated it like a job. I rocked up in the morning before the museum opened. I was there when the first person walked through, and I would be there when the last person walked out of the museum at the end of the day. I really liked being present there every day, because I think that started to create a real curiosity in the local population of Hobart. Like, what is this woman doing? She's still there. She's still drawing. And I would draw really large scale, as you can see, really detailed images of extinct and endangered species. So the idea was to do this work in public and to start as many conversations as I could with people while I was there, and to talk about extinction, to talk about the environment, and to talk about the specific species that I was drawing to, and give as much information as I could to people, because unfortunately, a lot of people don't realise that Australia is doing so poorly with conserving our native species. In fact, we're leading the world. I'm sure many of you would know that here, but I spoke to a lot of people who were really, really surprised by that. So it was kind of a PR exercise. I was sort of a free PR agent for endangered species for 4 years. Oh, no, back. So this is an example of one of the drawings that I did. So that one is a female golden toad from, I think it was from Colombia. So I wasn't just drawing Australian species, I was drawing species from all over the world initially in the first year of this work. And they were all species that had been declared extinct since the year 2000. So it was about making people aware of the fact that extinction is something that's speeding up, and it's happening right now. It's not a thing in the past that we've kind of overcome. So, you know, hopefully there was a bit of shock value, I suppose, in that. I learnt about every species that I had to draw. I researched them so that I could have things about these creatures to tell people and to sort of provoke people's interests in the creature itself. I learnt so many random facts about these different animals. As you can see there, that's a process shot of the drawing being erased. So that drawing, I think, took 3 weeks. So, ooh, what happened there? 3 weeks. And to erase the work, I think it probably took about 5 minutes. It's a really, really fast process to erase it. So that was something that was an element of the project that was there on purpose. So people would see me working and slaving away on this drawing for ages and ages, and then they would see me swipe it and just sort of destroy it within a few minutes, obviously kind of mirroring what's happening in the world. Really depressing stuff, guys, sorry. So I did a bit of everything. I did plants, I did fish, I did, you know, all of the genus. I tried not to favour the cute furry guys because they all get the attention that the slimy, you know, scaly ones don't. That's a hibiscus from Hawaii, I think. And that one ended up being rediscovered, so it's not extinct. I think there's about 3 of them growing out of a cliff face in Hawaii. The plants were really hard to get people to care about. People don't really care about something that doesn't have a facial structure. I noticed heaps of stuff while working there. I could have written a PhD about the patterns in the way that people reacted to what I was doing. That was a really interesting thing that I didn't anticipate working in public and speaking to the general public every day. And speaking to people who weren't like an art crowd, I suppose. People that come to TMAG are regular people that probably don't view art a lot, I think, for the most part. A lot of the times it's grandparents with grandkids or parents trying to, you know, keep kids busy on a rainy Saturday afternoon, stuff like that. So it was kind of quite a serious conversation to be having with people that you were just kind of meeting for the first time. But I think that the conversational element of the work kind of became the most important part of it in the end. After 4 years of doing it, you sort of start to realise that the drawings are just a trick to get people to talk to you and to get people to have a conversation about extinction and about really heavy subject matter that they probably don't want to talk about. So that was a crayfish from Mexico, I think. You can see in the background there the ghost images of previous drawings. So even when you erase something, the graphite hangs onto the page, you're left with a ghost image, and the drawings build up and build up. So I used 3 pieces of paper over 4 years. I wore out 2. The third one's still looking all right, but I might go back to it and see if I can make it really unarchival. Oh, what am I doing? This is tricky. Oh, look, I've just included that because it was one of my favourite drawings. So that's a Chinese paddlefish. Like, they've got some mental stuff in the Yangtze River in China, like stuff that's just millions and millions and millions of years old. I just thought this guy was beautiful, or girl, or, you know. Yeah, it's it is a real creature, I promise you. It's, yeah, incredible. Unfortunately, I think it's still definitely extinct. And that's a process shot of the erasure. That one was done at the Sydney Biennale. So we briefly took the project up to the Sydney Biennale, but then of course that was shut down by COVID after about 2 weeks. So initially the plan was to travel the work and to go to different museums around the country, but we all had to stay put during that time. So I stayed at TMAG, and that's okay. But we did get to the Biennale. You can also kind of start to see where the paper's wearing there too. There's bits peeling off. It becomes a really nice surface to draw on. It softens. You get this really nice muted quality. I actually really prefer drawing on paper that I've already erased stuff off of. So it's, I don't know, that was another little discovery about the paper. It's really nice when you erase it. So this was an explanation of the sort of social media element of the work, I suppose. So I was, gathering followers throughout the sort of project, and then when I'd been working on something for a few months and it was coming to the point where I knew I could finish it by a certain date, I would do an alert on my social media so that we would have an audience for the erasing. And at the beginning of the project, I'd get, 2-3 people, and it's a bit sad, but that's okay. You just keep going. And eventually, by the end of the project, we were getting stacks of people. That was just after COVID, this erasing, and there was actually a really big crowd behind that camera there. It was a really, really good turnout for that one. It became this event that people started to, I guess, kind of treat almost like something like a funeral, I suppose, like coming and saying goodbye to a species and thinking about the loss of that species. That's the drawing that was erased in that shot before. I think I'll put this one in here because this was the drawing that took the longest during my tenure at the museum. So that was a butterfly called Xerxes blue. Obviously, when you're using graphite, it's kind of a shame when you're drawing species that, the colour of which is really important. But I think it's the first butterfly where they've pinpointed its extinction to land clearing in San Francisco, but I'm sure there's others of those. It took, I think, about 4 months to draw that one. It's quite deceptive because you're probably thinking, why would that take 4 months? And it's because I drew every single scale on the butterfly wing. When I was thinking about the drawing I was doing, I wanted to get people to really notice the cool kind of thing about that species, because I was talking to lots of kids and trying to hook people into caring about these species through the drawing. And so I would always make sure that I would highlight in the drawing the particular feature of that species that I thought was interesting. So, yeah, the scales became this kind of monumental task, and the people that were funding my project sort of got a bit worried at that point because they were like, well, now we're just paying you to draw dots for 4 months. What's going on? But it was funny, though. It kind of gained a bit of a following, that one, because people were curious about whether I'd stick with it and what was going on with this drawing that took forever. Okay, so this is the last one I did. So this was February 2024, I think, when I finished up finally. So to finish up, obviously prior to this one that you're looking at now, I drew quite large examples of each species just for impact and to try and get people to stop as they were walking through that transitory space. But for the last one, I thought I'd do something different. And so I drew the remainder of a species. So that's a red handfish that you can see. And so there's only meant to be 100 of those guys left in the wild. They're the rarest fish on the planet, and they're Tasmanian. So I had to finish off with a Tassie species. And they're really bizarre. They're the cutest little guys. That's one there. That's it in real life. It looks like something off Sesame Street, I reckon. And in real life, if you can see above that little fish, if you can see there's like a screw. It's in an aquarium. It's just really, really clean water. This is at the breeding facility at IMAS in Tasmania, which I got to visit. But there's a screw on that kind of structure above the handfish, and that's just a regular size screw. So that gives you an idea of the size of that creature. They're about the size of your thumb. They're so, so cute. They're incredible. I got to liaise with the scientists that work with these guys a lot, and with several species as well. So that's it was one of the most interesting things to speak to scientists working with endangered species, to learn about them, to learn about the work that goes on around them. Such rich stuff to work with as an artist. Oh, there we go, Morgian skate. That's another Tassie species. I think I've got this image up because I'm a bit in love with the detritus around the drawing process and around any art making process. So you can see on the floor there, that's all my pencil shavings. The floor started out being white. It's become black because of all the graphite dust that's come off my pencil shavings for 4 years. So I managed to sort of just be really filthy. I'm surprised the museum had me there for that long because there were little black fingerprints all over the place as well too. Morgian skate, don't eat Tassie salmon. That's the species that Tasmanian farm salmon is currently causing to become extinct. Another amazing, really, really cool species. And that's one of the pieces of paper when I finished with it. So you can see that the artwork itself is it's just evidence of what I've been doing. It's not really a composed image. It's not something that most people would put on their walls, but it's about the sense of something having happened on that piece of paper. So it's more evidence than artwork. Okay, so this is the one that I've got on show with you guys at the Fiona Sidney Myer Gallery. So that one's Rec. That's a 10-metre long piece of paper, and that was the one that I started straight after Extinction Studies. So I did 4 and a bit years on Extinction Studies, and then I thought, what am I going to do now? I'll just do, a 10-metre roll piece of paper and draw on it for as long as possible and see what happens. The species that I'm drawing with that one is a shearwater. There's a close-up there. So shearwaters are also called mutton birds. There's lots of different subspecies of them. They're a migratory seabird, and they're really, really special to me because my family comes from a place called Lord Howe Island. Not sure if any of you guys have heard of that. It's a really, really tiny island just below Norfolk Island. I think it's about 11 k's long and about a k wide. And when I was a kid spending time there was about 70,000 shearwaters nesting on that island. So they become part of your family's story, part of your memories. And these birds are currently suffering really, really badly from plastics pollution, from lack of food because we're farming krill. We're catching krill. So there's not enough for them to eat. And there's been lots of big events where they're washing up on our shores. You might have noticed it, perhaps. That's Lord Howe, and that's me with my gran. I thought I'd put that in there. It's an incredible, incredible place. If you ever get a chance, try and visit, but it's very bourgeois now. It's very expensive. It didn't used to be like that when I was a little kid. So, here we go. That's my family on Lord Howe. That little girl sitting on the log on the right of screen, that's my grandmother, Isabel. So it's a pretty incredible island when you're thinking about extinction and the way that plays out, because it's such a small, little microcosm. It's really, really clear to see the effects of settlement of I guess it was not Brits, but like whalers. So that kind of industry of the British population in Australia. I think as soon as Lord Howe was settled, we lost about 4 species within a few months. So it's a pretty interesting history to think about personally, and my personal connection to those extinctions that happened there. And this is the start of Rec. So I'm just taking you through a few progress shots. So that's in my studio. Obviously, I don't have a 10-metre wall, so it's on rollers. And when I would draw and erase things, when I get to the end of the roll, we just kind of shifted the roll so that I could keep going along the 10 metres. With this one, I tried to loosen up the process, so it's not this kind of like draw the whole thing, erase the whole thing. I wanted to start playing with the idea of things coming in and out of existence, so partially completed drawings, partially erased, but still wiping out, hundreds of hours of work quite quickly in front of people to get them to think about that process happening in real time with actual wildlife. Some little detail shots there. I love their feet. I've got a bird foot fetish. Birds' feet are so beautiful. They're gorgeous, especially seabirds, because they always have these incredible, like webbing to be able to swim. Shearwaters are more natural swimmers than they are walkers. They actually can't walk very well because they've evolved to swim and to fly, but not to walk. So They're called mutton birds because being muttoned back in the day when the island was first settled, if you were muttoned, then you were drunk. And these birds, they can't walk, so they stand up and fall over and stand up and fall over and stand up and fall over. And you hear them crashing in the bush around Lord Howe all the time. The soundtrack of my childhood. And they have a call that sounds like a baby crying as well too. So they're smelly. They smell like fish, but they're my favourite bird. So I've got strange tastes, I guess. How am I going for time? 2:44? Am I over already? I think I'm coming up to the end of my slides. Have I rushed? So this is in my studio. As you can see, we've still got it on the rollers. That's my partner helping me out with trying to wrangle this huge piece of paper. It was an interesting process to go through when you've got to like sort of problem solve making an artwork that's more ambitious than the space that you've got to use. So we came up with some pretty good solutions, I think. And that's my workspace at Aros, the museum in Denmark, in Aarhus. So I've got these shots in here, and I think this might be my last slide too, actually. Hopefully I haven't rushed too quickly through it. But I've just got these ones up here because I really like to show how much mess I can make, how quickly. So that's probably after about 2 weeks worth of work there. When you sharpen your pencils on the ground, the graphite dust goes everywhere, and then you start to walk it everywhere. People can track where you go, where you spend your time. As you can see on the one right there, I made a really dirty patch under that bird while I was working on it, and people seem to find the filth that I create kind of interesting and I don't know, like funny. People thought I was, especially Danish people who are very clean, found me really funny. Yeah, but that's hopefully you guys can come and check out that work. I'll be drawing and working on it while I'm here. I just draw and I talk to people at the same time. I often whip out my iPad and start sort of bombarding people with facts about whatever creature I'm drawing. So please come in and have a chat to me. I'm really nice. And I can talk forever. But yeah, I'd love to talk to you guys and you know, talk about whatever, drawing, extinction, whatever. Come in and visit me.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Lucy. And that was just, wow, what a whirlwind. That's incredible. I kept thinking of your body in this.
Oh yeah, my shoulder's stuffed.
Yes, I can imagine.
It's the elbow where you feel it most, but shoulder, elbow, the hand's fine. So in fact, someone tried to, I was walking through London after going to Denmark, and I had some guy on a scooter come up and try and grab my phone out of my hand and rob my phone, but he didn't know that I've been gripping pencils for millions of hours, so he did get it.
Held on tight.
Yeah.
Look, we've probably got time for a couple of questions, actually. Has anyone got a question for Lucienne?
They're probably all a bit overwhelmed. I threw a lot.
Yeah, yes.
Oh, hello.
Thank you to actually complete a full drawing.
It varies depending on what it is. So the butterfly, that was 4 months. So what's that? 6 hours a day, 5 days a week for 4 months. I'm not good at maths, but someone can figure that out probably, like upwards of like 400 hours. And again, mostly, I don't know what it was, but pretty much anything that I erased, it would take about 5 minutes to erase it. 5 minutes seemed to be the magic number. The like most commonly asked question when I would erase a drawing would be like, oh, isn't it really sad? Like, how do you feel when you erase the drawing? And like, it's so much fun. I love wiping out all of that work. It's kind of like the closest you could compare it to is like kicking over a sandcastle, but it's just a sandcastle that you've spent like 4 months making. So yeah, but it's, I don't know, there's something about that action and just swiping it. And like, it's just a drawing too. Like, yeah.
Just a drawing.
Yeah, things that wrong. It's still on the same paper.
Yeah. So I think the first, I think I did 60 species over the 4 years that I did Extinction Studies at TMAG, and over 3 pieces of paper. I'm kind of annoyed about changing the paper though, because the only reason why I changed the paper was because we were taking it to the Sydney Biennale and I didn't want to leave my workspace in TMAG vacant. So prior to that, the plan was to just use the one piece of paper until it fell apart. So I kind of didn't push it as much as I thought I could have done. So maybe that's the next thing to do, just work on something until there's a big hole in the middle of it. Yeah, pretty odd, I know.
Any other questions? Right, it's back there.
I was wondering what your background from a reference or
Yeah, so I do work from photographs. When I'm able to liaise with scientists working with that species, that's awesome because I get really great imagery to work with. Sometimes I'm just Googling stuff and I don't have great imagery, but you sort of try and patch it together. And I guess like they're relatively realistic drawings, but I wouldn't say that they're photorealistic. I was trying to make the drawings as realistic as I could within my kind of like skill sets and the limits of that. And if you ever want to get heaps better at drawing really fast, it's such a good crash course to draw, to have parameters where you're like, I'm just going to draw stuff that's been declared extinct since the year 2000 and a little bit of everything. So you end up drawing some really weird stuff that you don't actually want to draw most of the time. Like I'm not great with fur and I had to draw a possum that drove me nuts. But because I was doing it in front of people, I had to problem solve and figure it out. And so it's a really good way to sort of force yourself to draw things that you're not comfortable with. But yeah, if you want to see the actual process, come in and watch. And, you know, it's and sometimes you even get to see me make big mistakes and have to erase everything and start all over again too. It's all out there for people to see.
Public, yeah. There's nowhere to hide.
No.
Look, Jeb, just a reminder that is next Thursday between 5 and 7. So I hope you can all come, and to those listening online, at the Sidney Myer, and for a whole month, Lucienne will be there drawing every day that it's open. Oh, one more question, Sonia.
Yeah, so it's like an adjacent kind of practical question because you're doing these like long durational works in places where you may not live. So just wondering, like, how does that work in terms of being supported by institutions in terms of, you know, your time, accommodation?
It's a weird way to be an artist. I mean, being an artist is just kind of a weird thing in itself, any way that you do it. But I was fortunate enough to know a local philanthropy group in Hobart who they do a little bit of stuff with Mona down in Tassie, but they tend to fund the sciences and they try and set up relationships between artists and scientists, and they've got a real environmental sort of bent to them. And so I knew of this group. I'd done a project with them prior to that on Lord Howe, and rather than going through the whole NAVA like grant kind of thing, I just sent this group an email and said, would you pay me minimum wage to do this in public for a year? And that was the original plan. And so they said yes to that. And then COVID occurred and we shut down. And because of that, we extended it. But it kind of became a really popular exhibit at the museum. And so it was extended 4 times. So basically I had a wage to work for 4 and a bit years, which was fantastic. But it's sort of, I don't know, it means that you can't really make a lot of stuff around that project as well too. So I've just signed up with a new commercial gallery in Sydney and they're asking me for work for the stockroom. And I said, guess what? I've erased everything I've done for the last 5 years. I've got nothing for you. So again, really dumb decision. Don't do what I do. Like this isn't the way to be a successful artist. But it is really hard. I spent 4 months in Denmark away from my family to do that work over there. I'm up here for a month away from my, when I say family, I mean my partner and my dogs, my 2 stuffies. So it's definitely complicated, I suppose. But yeah.
Thanks for that question. Thanks for all the questions. I think, well, we've got about 4 more minutes. So if there's another guest.
I've got one. You mentioned about Tasmanian salmon.
Yes.
I'm not fully across it.
Oh, let me get political. Let's go. It's an election. Let's just get political.
Come on.
But, you know, extinction is political. You can't get around it. So, and it's funny because I was working in the State Museum, and the State Museum in Tasmania, they have to be apolitical. but they weren't paying me. I was just in their space. So I got away with some stuff. So the Morgian skate, you might have heard talk about Tanya Plibersek doing a review of salmon farming in a place called Macquarie Harbour. So that's up on the northwest coast of Tasmania, a rural area, really, really rural. You know, all of Tassie is, but Macquarie Harbour particularly so. So there's not much work up there for people. The salmon farming industry does employ some people up there, not as many as the salmon farming industry says they employ. But it's a really, really destructive, high pollution industry. It's basically like battery hen farming in the water. So they've got lots and lots of salmon that is kept in a pen. And then because of the amount of feces that the salmon produces, that just goes into the waterway. And so the Morgian skate, maybe I'll go back to it. It's an incredible creature. The Morgian skate has been around since Gondwana was still together. So we're talking like 50, 60 million years old. And it's a species that only exists in that harbour. And I think there's meant to be about they think there's about 60 of them left. And they're starting a breeding program. And the federal government is putting in like $32 million to aerate the water in the harbour. The salmon farming industry isn't paying for that. So I've got a lot to say about how dirty that industry is. So yeah, basically I don't want people to lose their jobs, but they need to move on land, whether they like it or not, because the water's too warm anyway. It's warming, so that's why we're having mass fish kill-offs in Tassie with all the salmon farms. And like, how cool is a Morgian skate? Like, they're heaps better than salmon. So that was one of the hardest drawings I had to do as well, even though it's essentially a flat creature. And I didn't get it exactly right. It looks like it's got a really massive brain. They don't have that huge bulbous kind of head like I ended up doing. So I'm pretty good. I always admit to my mistakes when I don't get something perfectly right. But that was one where I did a big kind of erasing event and had a real go with a microphone in the museum about the salmon farming industry. So it's kind of cool to have those moments. And they didn't kick me out after that too. I think someone got in trouble though at the museum. But
it's amazing how art can do that, isn't it? It can get in between things and sort of agitate, but kind of, you know.
Yeah. I think that was I don't know. I when I sort of came up with the idea of Extinction Studies, and this is probably quite a crucial piece of information. I probably should have said this in my talk, but it's kind of a personal piece of information too. But before I came up with the idea for Extinction Studies, about 6 months prior to that, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It's a really hard disease to say. I'll just say MS. And so that was a moment in my life where I was like, okay, so I'm such a cliche. I'm a walking cliche. I had that moment where I was like, oh my God, something really serious is happening with your health. What are you doing with your life? What is your art about? Who are you making your art for? What do you want your art practice to be doing? And at that moment, I just thought, I'm pretty over making drawings for rich people's walls. I mean, I'll do that again. I love don't get me wrong. I mean, money's great and everything, but at that point I was like, do something that means something. So that's when I came up with the idea and when I sort of launched into Extinction Studies. So yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you so much. It's very generous of you, the whole presentation today, and also to be with us for a month. So thanks, and thanks for today.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.